Hi everybody, this is Lee Harrison on Frequency Mama. This is kind of an impromptu video. I don't know how this is all gonna come out, but I realized today that today is a day in my country, the United States, where many people are gathering for marches across the country to, on behalf of families and children who are being separated at our borders. This is a huge issue, and I'm not going to go into the politics of it. I'm not going to go into various angles that the news media is taking or how they're reporting. I just want to go in on the human level of children being separated from their parents and the under insanely traumatic circumstances and at the US borders and also throughout the world. If you just think about all the oppressive conditions that people right now are enduring, and many of them enduring with their young children, it's staggering. So a couple days ago I listened to a interview on the Duncan Trussell Family Hour, which is a podcast that I listen to. Duncan Trussell is a comedian, but he also has this fantabulous podcast, and he just has these really deep, rich, and awesome conversations with pretty awesome people on the planet right now. He was having a conversation with Roshi Joan Halifax, who is a Zen Buddhist teacher, writer. She I believe oversees the Upaya Zen Center. I think it's in New Mexico. It's somewhere in the Southwest. And she's recently released a book called, I believe it's called Standing at the Edge or Standing on the Edge. And it sounds like, I haven't read it yet, but it sounds like this book is really speaking to our times, where there's just so much, batshit crazy going on all over the place. And there's just so much trauma that's coming up for people, generational trauma that's coming up, institutionalized trauma. There's just trauma everywhere right now. It almost feels like things are coming to a head, and there's just this, I think in my last video I was talking about the call of the wound for the individual, where you have these states of anxiety or depression or hopelessness, and in these states of discomfort, we can really recognize those within ourselves as that's the call of the wound. That's the call sign to come back in and to bring love and healing to the parts of ourselves that are making requests. And I feel like that's happening on a grander level, on a collective level. We have these collective wounds that are rising to the surface, and they are the call signs. They are flashing, red light, green light, come, it's the lighthouse, it's the beacon for the healing that and the processing and the resolution of trauma that we as individuals and as a collective, as a planet, are in dire need of. So Duncan Trussell and Roshi Joan Halifax were speaking, and she brought up the term moral injury. And it's how I understood it, it's the state or the experience of when you are witness or aware of situations and suffering in the world, that an injustice that just is so intense, and you feel as if there is no course of action to take. There is no way that you can contribute or resolve this, that it is overwhelming, and that in your awareness there's also a sense of helplessness around how to meet and address the injustice or the really traumatic happenings that are happening all the time. And I think with our news media, we're just exposed to it with more frequency, and also through the lens of news media. At any rate, they were talking about the state of moral injury and the impact that it has on us. And I just was thinking about that from the perspective of being a parent and of being a mother. And I know for me that since becoming a mother and having a child, my empathy, I was always pretty empathic to begin with, but it just feels like it's exploded in a good way. My heart and my empathy center has just like grown so much. And at the same time, there has been this experience of this helplessness, some of it a learned helplessness that I've carried from childhood, and certainly this moral injury that Joan Halifax was talking about, where I have a very young child, I have a 2-year-old, and it's all I can do to just meet his needs and get dinner on the table and do my job and be present for my husband. And like I don't even know how to tend to anything else. And it's a very, yeah, I think it's this what she's speaking of. It's this moral injury, this overwhelm, and this sense of helplessness around it. And I just want to say that there are people who are mobilizing. There are attorneys coming in out of the woodwork and going down to, say, Texas and meeting with families. And there are people like, I think her name is Glennon Doyle. She has a foundation called Rising Up, and they are raising money to put people on the ground so that these families can get the legal and the humanitarian support that they need to find their children, right? There's all of that stuff going on, and it's great. And then in the day-to-day as parents, what do we do, and how do we weave this into what we're doing with our children in a way that doesn't feel like we're taking on vicarious trauma? And I began to think about different parenting approaches that I've read, like hand-in-hand parenting, positive discipline, RIE, and a lot of these approaches talk about parenting through connection. And so when your child is experiencing their own discomfort, their own overwhelm, their own feelings of fear or anger or powerlessness, of times where they may feel abandoned, or that, those are the times not to drop your connection with them. Those are the times where we want to stay connected with them through those hard feelings that they're having as young people. And I thought, gosh, this is something that day to day that we can do. We can do our best, because we're not perfect, and it's not 100% of the time that we can meet our children, but we can do our best to maintain connection with them through their biggest, messiest, most triggering to us emotions and fears. And this runs counter to what many of us grew up with, this idea of, I'm thinking of, spare the rod, spoil the child, or, they're crying and acting up. You don't want to reward them for bad behavior, so don't engage. Like labeling a child's big, messy feelings as bad behavior and disconnecting from them so that they don't learn to be bad in order to get your attention. These are like old paradigms of parenting that I think many generations of us have been raised with, and we've learned, and we've kind of passed down the line. And now we're in this interesting stew of really understanding, one, more about how children develop, how they grow on a neurological level. We know way more about attachment now. And we have all of this like trauma happening in the world right now. It's just kind of in our face. So we're in this interesting time in history, at least our more recent history, of being change agents in our parenting. And many of us, I think, are straddling the two paradigms, and we've got one foot in the old and one foot in the new, and in the middle is us doing the best that we can to heal whatever needs to be healed within, so that we can meet our children in the darkest, scariest, most possibly infuriating places, that we can maintain to the best of our ability a connection to them. And what we're doing there is that we are parenting with empathy, and our children are experiencing being the recipients of empathy, and they hopefully will grow into adults who have a rich understanding of their empathic nature, and who are connected to the seat of their heart and the seat of their soul, so that when they do move out into the world after they've left us, they are in a place of authority with themselves that's rooted in their truth, that's rooted in compassion, and that they are able to use their empathy muscle effectively and with discernment, where their empathy isn't an extension of a form of self-violence, where they are abandoning themselves in an effort to help another, because that doesn't work, but that it's coming from a really skilled place, because it's what we have been endeavoring to model for them in their formative years of parenting by connection. So I just wanted to step in, and for the parents out there that are just feeling like, gosh, I should go to this march, and I've got a 6-month-old, and that's great. If you have a 6-month-old or a 2-month-old or a 2-year-old or whatever, and you're going to the marches, that's amazing. And if you're somebody who it just feels like, okay, that's not my contribution, I just want you to think about the ways in which your daily practice of parenting your child and self-parenting your own little one within, that is such a revolutionary act of love and in a world that is just in dire need of love and applied empathy that is skilled and rooted in truth, that's grounded. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I'm like literally just figuring all this out as I'm taping. Gosh. I was born in the 70s, right? Tapes. As I'm doing this video here. Digital. I think I'm going to leave it at that. I don't even think I'm going to edit this. I think I'm just going to post it and let it be. And I guess my takeaway is that I think as parents, one thing that we can do is really nourish the ground from which empathy, the foundations of an empathic being, can really kind of take root and sprout. This is something that we absolutely can do day to day. And it's imperfect. It's not something that we need to be perfect at. It's just something that we can do our best at. So I'm going to leave it at that. This is getting close to 15 minutes, which feels a little long to me. To all the people out there who are affected by the pain and suffering of the families and children that are being separated either by policies at the border or through war or famine, refugees, I just send you so much love. I send them so much love. And I just pray that we all remember that we are love. And we can bring that remembering back. All right. Take good care. Bye-bye.